Okay, Jordan, we are rolling on eScribe and YouTube, so we'll be ready right at 1.
Great, thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call the Land Use and Planning Committee to order for November 17th. We continue to meet virtually. The instructions for how to access this meeting are on the agenda and remain unchanged. And we welcome your participation via those instructions. Our first item of business is roll call. Amanda, can you call the roll?
Yeah. Anderson? Absent. Becerra?
Present.
Contos?
Here.
Hart?
Here.
Hess?
Present.
Jones?
Present.
Merritt?
Present.
Ramos? Absent. Cheryl?
Present.
Masika? Absent. Van Mossberg? Absent. West? Absent.
Looks like Heidi just joined. Okay, there are no minutes attached, so we'll. Oh, I'm sorry, we do have minutes from November 10th. Are there changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will be approved. So public comment on items not listed on our agenda. Okay, seeing none, we have 5 regular agenda items. I might switch up the order a little bit. Item 3.4, can I just get a sense from council members if there's questions or discussion on the Schilling Street and Dearborn Avenue item? And I'm not necessarily wanting to take up the item now, but I'm just kind of wondering how long it'll take. Julie, do you go ahead?
I guess I just have comment more than questions, and quite frankly, I guess I could probably just save them for next Monday night when we finish the public hearing, because I just want to make sure that the comments that we've received from some of the neighborhood folks are put into the record. So I don't necessarily need to talk about that today.
Okay, sounds good. So I think what we'll do is we'll take the appointments to the planning board, and then we'll do the Schilling Street item because those are both going to be really quick, and then we'll take the rest of the items in the order listed. So the first item is appointments to the planning board, and as you all know, we recently had a round of appointments to the planning board that took place this last spring. We have 3 vacancies. One of those was a result of the planning board chair taking a job out of state and vacating the position. We have 6 applicants for 3 positions, and as you all know, we have a strong history of really good quality applicants to the planning board. And that's no exception this time. We have 6 highly qualified applicants. And one of the and it's such a benefit to the city to be able to select from such a deep talent pool when we go to fill these positions. Today, what I'm going to do is, as chair, I'm going to make a motion to fill the vacancies based on some reapplications of some very strong members, as well as based on a second application of someone who we thought very highly of and did not appoint last time. In doing so, I hope that we continue the tradition of building a deep bench of folks who are interested. And so the folks who I don't make a motion to appoint, I would encourage to continue to apply in the future. But I think we would save ourselves ourselves and our applicants some time in this process by returning to that really rich pool that we've already got. So I'm going to propose that as a process, and I'll move that we reappoint Elizabeth Costello and Shane Morrissey, and that we appoint Sierra Farmer, who we interviewed this last spring. Sierra is an alum of our local government citizens academy, and works for the state of Montana for the DNRC, and I'm sure you'll all recall her great interview this last spring. And like I said, in doing so, I would hope that we would retain, or that the folks who are not appointed would continue to apply in the future. This planning board positions are sought after, and it just takes a couple times of being persistent to get on this board. So that's my motion, and I would take any questions or discussion from council members. Julie.
All right, I'll bite. I do really want to say thanks to all of the other folks who took time to put their applications in and agree with. I support Jordan's motion, and I also agree with his encouragement to continue to keep your eyes open for when positions come open on this board. It is obviously is a very critical part of our decision-making process around land use decisions. So it's great that we continue to have so much interest in it. Thank you all.
Thanks, Julie. Heather?
Jordan, I was wondering, in terms of a matrix of different skill sets that are required for this board, do the applicants that you have recommended fit those boxes?
They do, Heather. The two of the applicants remain, are reapplications and continue to fulfill or meet the profiles that they have. Sierra Farmer would be replacing Vince Caristo. Both have a planning background, and I think that's important. But obviously we don't want that to dominate. But it's extraordinarily important on the planning board. Sierra and Vince are both West Siders. They both geographically and professionally have similar backgrounds, so that fed into the decision.
Sure. Okay. And then do we try and have realtors on this particular planning board?
I don't know that we try to. It's certainly a skill set that is related, but there's not a professional position called out specifically for a realtor.
Okay. I think just for talking about deepening the bench, I think Sheena as a realtor brings that kind of skill set to this particular table and subsequent applications, I hope. But she, like Sierra, both attended the Local Government Citizens Academy. So again, it kind of just underscores the value of that whole program that we launched as a means to try and engage with our community and keep them coming back to us and volunteering their time. So I'm in agreement with your recommendations today.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Are there any additional questions or discussion? Is there any public comment? All right, seeing none, we can go ahead with a roll call vote on the motion.
Sarah,
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
Harp,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Merritt,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
and West.
Yes.
All right, we have 8 yeses, no nos, abstains.
Okay, thanks. We can put that on the consent agenda. And we'll take up item 3.4 next. And so I'll turn it over to Caitlin McCafferty. We've had a public hearing on this item and a staff presentation on Monday night. I'll just ask Caitlin if there's any new information or anything that we want to, anything that she'd like to refresh us on. And then we can get Julie's comment and any others into the record. And then this item will be back for final consideration on November 29th. Caitlin.
Thank you. No new information, just highlighting the crux of this proposal is, instead of using these current relatable zones, what this staff recommendation has taken in comprehensively the growth policy, especially the residential surrounding areas, and are recommending that B2-2 instead of a C1-4 to get some lower intensity uses. Yeah, so any questions, feel free to ask.
Okay, thanks. Julie, did you want to make your comment now?
Sure. So the folks from the Franklin to the Fort Neighbors in Action as a group and several neighbors of these, immediate neighbors of these properties wrote into us and not to say that they were opposed to the zoning. While I think that our decision-making space in these situations is always a little difficult for residents because the decision on zoning is just black or white. And we don't necessarily know specifically what's going to go onto the site when we make that zoning decision. So that's just one of those difficult facts of life, I think, for the existing residents. But the main concern that was expressed, I guess, is really about keeping traffic on Schilling Street to a neighborhood pace. A lot of effort has been put into Schilling Street on the north side of South Avenue with putting in some traffic calming. And so I guess just to put the word out there that the neighbors would really appreciate if that effort could continue in this part of Schilling Street as the density increases. Just keeping it to that neighborhood, that obviously the number of vehicles could increase, but I think if the pace of traffic through the neighborhood is maintained with some calming devices, that would be much appreciated by those neighbors. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. For the record, Stacy has joined us, and then I have Heidi and then Stacy in the speaker queue.
So this reminds me of a rezone we recently had over on the west side where we also rezoned it with a B designation versus I guess the C, a commercial designation. Is that correct?
Caitlin, do you want to take that?
You may be, I'm not sure about the west side. My last project was an annexation on England Boulevard, which was pretty similar.
Yeah, if I recall, we recently, I mean, maybe it's not that recent. my scale of time is off. Rezoned something as a B, maybe it was, Jordan, you remember if it was a B1, 2? It was a business designation versus the C14, which I think is what was along the railroad track for a similar purpose. I guess having the increased density, but more restricted uses of what that land can be used for to respect the neighborhood residential character. And I just wanted to point it out because I think it's an interesting parallel and a good way of trying to direct development to be more, I guess, more respectful of the residential character in the area.
Yeah, thanks. I don't recall the specific project, but I do remember doing something similar. And the annexation that Caitlin mentioned came to mind as well as one where this meets the project intention, and so it's perfectly adequate.
Defoe and Burton was the reason that you're thinking of.
Stacy, go ahead.
Thanks so much. Apologies for being a couple minutes late this morning. I actually really appreciated the comments that Julie Merritt made. And I had asked Aaron Wilson, so Chair, I don't know if this is a good point in which to allow for this, but having been in touch with many of the neighbors in this area, the division line between 6 and 5 wards is South Avenue. And, I realize that traffic is not a condition of rezone, but I do think that Julie is right. It is definitely a component that there is concern around. And so I'd asked Aaron Wilson to join us today to give a little bit more context of, kind of how they make decisions. And around traffic calming and some of the, where there we have a larger master plan and where this neighborhood also falls into that. The other question, and I apologize if this already got discussed, but in the agency comments from Aaron Wilson, it talked about the kind of triggering for a traffic study would be 200 car trips. And my curiosity is basically, how does that formula get determined? I know it's at the time of pulling building permits, because I think that there's also a tiny bit of discrepancy, and I know we can't take this into consideration around the rezoning, but what the maximum density would be allowed versus what the applicant is sort of kicking around. And I know in your previous presentation on Monday night, you had a screen that sort of showed what the maximum density could be if built out. Yes. There we go, slide 10. So I'd like a little bit more information on that, because, I do think that, the applicant is not bound by anything that they're tentatively proposing right now, that once we do this rezoning, it is permanently in place and they can build to the maximum capacity allowed under the zoning and thinking, it's a now 21 dwelling units. And so how does the car trip equation come into effect? And then if Aaron, at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair, could talk a little bit more about overall neighborhood traffic and traffic calming measures, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, sure. Mayor, you have your hand up. Do you want to weigh in on this or a different topic? Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted.
I'm sorry, sir, you were calling on me?
Yeah, I was wondering did you want to weigh in on this?
I do, with your permission.
Absolutely, please.
I appreciate the opportunity. Just it happens to be serendipitous that I'm sitting here, but one of the things that that I want and hope that council will continue to consider as we march down a path here in making these land use decisions are a couple of things. One is the tension between our growth policy and our existing zoning map is slowing down the development of quality housing in our community. And as we move forward with code reform, one of the things we're going to need to do is reconcile that. And that is likely to be challenging, but it gets us out of this business of this piecemeal rezoning, and I've come around to think that we ought to be out of that business. The second thing I will suggest is that as you consider any of these proposals, particularly for rezoning, always assume that maximum density will be the impact, and base your decisions on that rather than what may be a proposed development today, because that could go away at any time. So you're really thinking about everything that this zoning allows as a function of your deliberations. And frankly, I don't think it matters a great deal what the proposal is. Always assume that it will be the most and base your decision on that. And finally, there is not a one of these rezonings that will not trigger concerns over traffic. And frankly, the time to consider that is not at the time of a rezoning request, but at the time of through our master planning processes, and also at the time of once we see what's on the ground. I respect and appreciate the concerns, but until we know what the project is and there's a building permit, I think it's premature to try to spend a great deal of time trying to sort out the transportation implications or traffic implications for that matter beyond what our foundational documents are. And your professional staff has relied heavily on those foundational documents in making these recommendations to you. And you will see me pretty frequently standing behind those professional recommendations of your staff in moving the community forward. And thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Mayor. Aaron or Caitlin, I'll turn it over to either of you.
Yeah, I don't know who you'd like to go next and talk, but since the mayor just ended on transportation, maybe that's a good transition to just briefly mention. I tend to agree with the mayor's position that it's hard to evaluate and maybe not as worthwhile spending too much time on transportation until we see what the proposal is. And that's typically when we're evaluating what the transportation impacts are, because especially with a mixed sort of neighborhood commercial zoning, you could have any mix of residential and commercial, and those will all have potentially different transportation characteristics or parking impacts or things like that I think the neighborhood was pointing out in their comment letters. The only other thing I would mention is that we've pointed out Schilling is a neighborhood greenway. We did the quick build traffic calming north of south. And we had, one of the reasons we didn't go south of south is just the traffic and the same sort of speeding and safety issues didn't exist at the south end of South Avenue. Like, it's hard to say. I'm sorry. I feel like we need a better street name. And so one of the things we can look at, we have the neighborhood traffic management program that gives us a tool to evaluate these kinds of streets and do it sort of citywide and look at where we have the greatest impacts and where we need to address these traffic safety issues. And a development at this location could potentially elevate doing additional traffic calming or improvements in Schilling or in this particular part of the neighborhood. But until we see that development proposal and can effectively evaluate it, we won't really know. But the nice thing about that program is that we are nimble and we can do those improvements quickly and efficiently and based on what's happening on the ground. And so I think that gives us a lot of room to make that decision when we see that. The other thing I would mention is related to Schilling and South intersection, and that's one that we have identified for improvement as part of the neighborhood greenway. And again, that is being looked at in the context of where all of the other potential crossing locations we need to do around the city and all of the locations that are seeing development pressure. It's certainly not, just this neighborhood that's seeing a lot of development. We're seeing a lot of activity on the north side and the west side and out Mullen Road area and the Swifts-Kane area master plan. And so we're trying to balance where we can most effectively address those transportation issues. And so as this development continues to move forward, that's a factor that we can look at. And does it elevate that intersection and to something that we need to address more quickly in order to accommodate it? So I think, the rezone itself doesn't give me necessarily a lot of concern from the transportation side. I think we have the tools necessary to help mitigate those impacts. And it's a fairly low traffic area currently. And so even at the maximum development, adding 100 or 200 trips a day, those local streets will still be well under what we're typically start to see concern when you're starting to be over 1,000 trips a day, something that might elevate to a collector level and need more substantial transportation improvements. So hopefully that helps give a little bit of context, but if there are other specific questions, happy to weigh in.
Thank you, Aaron. Stacy, do you have any follow-ups?
Well, I do actually, and with all due respect to Mr. Mayor, the problem and the reason why I think we're having a conversation about traffic right now is because there is concern from the neighbors, and there is no other point in the public hearing process for them to, kind of air their concerns. I don't get the sense from the neighbors that I've spoken to that they have a problem with the development and they see the need, as we all do, but that once, they don't really know where the best to plug in to have their concerns about traffic heard, because if once, the process continues, all of it then happens at the staff level. And so I think my hope is as we kind of figure out some of that as we go through our code reform, and I know a lot of it is dictated by state law, but that is why I had asked Mr. Wilson to attend this meeting and give a little bit context because of the feedback I had gotten. So appreciate you, Aaron, for taking some time out of your day to give that feedback. And with that, I don't have any other questions or comments at this point.
Okay, thanks. Aaron?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out too, that's a really good point about point of process and when to get involved about things like traffic, and just reiterate with the way that we're managing some of these through the neighborhood traffic management program is specifically designed to help figure out how to address these types of and give a separate process for these types of neighborhood or citizen complaints probably isn't the right word, but concerns around traffic, and then put that into our full system. And so it doesn't have to be tied to a specific development. We can funnel those concerns into that separate process and make sure that we're moving it forward as appropriate.
Thanks, Aaron. Heather?
Thanks, Jordan. Caitlin, could you remind me how much it costs every time someone wants to come in and rezone their parcel?
Yes, for 12 our fee sheet. A zoning map amendment that is up to or equal to 1 acre is $4,179. For greater than an acre, $6,442.
Okay. So ultimately, this is a cost that ends up getting passed along to our future residents, be them homeowners or renters. And I think to the mayor's point that every time we have to do this, it ends up costing those end users, our consumers, our constituents, more money. And I'm totally back the mayor on this concept of we got to change things from how they've always been, because the process gets extremely expensive. And I have to say, as I've sat here on council for 4 years, I did not know when I first got here how expensive the process is and what that ends up doing for our community for building up a lack of affordable housing. To the mayor's point about being cognizant that these zoning requests are potentially at the highest level. Yep, that's exactly right. And as I look at this particular project, that means 13 more homes than currently can exist in this particular area. And that's 13 more households that will have a roof over their heads. And I think that is in complete alignment with our housing policy, our growth policy, and the ethical thing to do. I think, we have to be cognizant of traffic, but typically the way we usually think about is only the 2 hours of the day when most traffic is flowing through any neighborhood. And unfortunately, we build for those 2 hours instead of the other 22. And so I think if we really want to be serious about fighting climate change, part of that is having to address how we transport ourselves across the city. And we have to prioritize people over cars. I mean, that's just ultimately what we got to do, folks. Okay, that's enough of my soapbox. Thank you all.
Okay, Mirta and then Julie.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to point out the really obvious here that, a good land use plan requires a transportation planning component to it, or we're just going to continue to kick that can down the proverbial road. But so I think it's hard to separate the two, at least, from our constituents' mind is, they know more units are coming, which means more transportation. And we have a need and we need to address that. And I'm really hopeful that that's going to get addressed during our code review. But I see all of this just to better understand, I guess, for the public's benefit. When will the MPO or any of the recommendations that would come out of the MPO be included in the building permit approval? I think it'd be really important for people to know that that perhaps, there's no mechanism for public engagement during that part of the process, but wondering, Erin, if you can tell me if the recommendations from the MPO would be coming at the time of the building permit approval.
I think, to whatever extent possible, we'd be reviewing what any appropriate mitigation would be, given the scale of development. I think we try to do that with every project that we have an opportunity to review. And I think it's often dependent on scale. Reviewing a single family house doesn't seem necessarily the most time effective, but if this is a good mixed use project that is going to have traffic impacts on the neighborhood greenway, we would want to see those impacts mitigated. And could potentially help participate in that mitigation as well through the quick build traffic calming or expediting improvements at South and Schilling or those other sorts of issues that we would want to look at. So I guess it's hard to say at this stage with the rezoning until we see what happens, but we would certainly be interested in when those building permits come through, working through engineering to make sure that they're aware of all of those issues and that our recommendations for potential right-of-way improvements match the plans that we have.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Mirta, do you have anything further?
No, I'll lower my hand. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So Julie and then Stacy.
Sorry, I think this turned into way more of a discussion than you were anticipating, Jordan, but I do want to clarify a couple of things. I did not bring up the comments from the neighbors to say in any way that I'm opposed to this zoning or that those neighbors are opposed to the zoning. I think that what Erin, the information that Erin just shared with us is the kind of thing that the neighbors wanted to hear, is that with increased density does come increased impacts, and those neighbors are hoping that it stays on the city's radar screen, that other improvements to help mitigate some of those impacts will continue to be considered. I also wanted to maybe touch on the cost associated that Heather brought up. I mean, that question is like, how long is a rope? How much does it cost? I mean, Caitlin just gave you the fees that the city charges for the process, but that in no way reflects what the property owner is actually paying, because they they typically have to have professionals assist them with that, and that adds, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars to the process. So just to clarify that. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. Stacy?
Really quick, and I don't know if Caitlin or if this is something that Aaron, this neighborhood is also considered an Invest Health neighborhood. And I got this question from one of the constituents, and I actually didn't know how, if at all, that designation impacts or how we take that into consideration, either through, you know, traffic measures or zoning, or and so would and I bring this up because I know a couple of my constituents who had said they were going to attend the meeting thought this was a later agenda item. And so given that this will be recorded, wanted to make sure, since they may not get an opportunity to make comment, that was also a curiosity that they had in regards to how does that get factored in to projects like this, if at all.
For planning in the scope of a rezone where it exists now, for my staff analysis, there's not much. However, what in Invest Health and our neighborhood like this one, and anyone else on planning who wants to chime in and give some more detail, or Aaron, if you have further things, is when that comes to play with the growth policy and more of long range planning as opposed to in the scope of a rezone.
Are there any additional? Are there any? Oh, Aaron, go ahead.
I would only add that the Invest Health designation and equity in particular plays really heavily into how we invest public infrastructure dollars, including the quick build traffic calming and through our CIP. And so we continue to do that. But again, it's on a sort of on a holistic citywide, where are the investments that we can most impact those neighborhoods, and wouldn't necessarily relate to a specific project unless it's creating those impacts that then elevate that location for further consideration.
Thanks. Okay. Are there any members of the public who would like to provide comment on this? If you'd like to, you can use the hand raise function in Zoom. It's come to my attention from Stacy's remarks that perhaps I shouldn't have adjusted the agenda to move this earlier. So I'll just keep watching for additional members of the public, and we'll take comment on this again at the end of the meeting. And okay, I've got Jenny Mish. Jenny, you should be able to unmute yourself and provide comment.
Well, hello, everyone. I am Jenny Mish. I live at 2505 Schilling Street. I just joined the meeting, and I was expecting this agenda item later, so I feel completely unprepared for what you've just been discussing. But I'd like to start by saying thank you for your service to the city and making our community a good place to live. I assume that I get to just do my comments now, right?
Yeah, go right ahead, Jenny. And this meeting is also recorded, and we have your contact information. So if you do watch the discussion, you're welcome to provide further comment by email or by phone or and we can touch base about that after the meeting.
Thank you. So I would like to say that I live within 150 feet of the rezoned parcel. I also live within a block of South Avenue, and there's a lot of fast driving on this very short stretch of like just 4 blocks of Schilling Street. And I've been shocked by 40-mile-per-hour speeds. And then when I learned that this was supposed to be a greenway and that other traffic calming was installed farther up, I had already started talking to my immediate neighbors about this, and had submitted a statement on behalf of a couple of us to the TPCC back in May, requesting that we have traffic calming at the same time as the rest of the Schilling Greenway, which we appreciate very much. So when this rezoning request, announcement came, I started talking more with my neighbors and found that I've talked with probably at least 30 or 40 neighbors in the area right around the rezoning. And I was kind of surprised that a number of them felt like they didn't feel like it was prudent to speak out about what they really believe because of neighborhood relationships. And then there were others that just felt cynical, but many, when I asked them, would you be interested in having traffic calming? And they just went, yes, we really, really need slower traffic speeds on our street. So I also attended the planning board meeting earlier this month when this rezoning request was discussed. And I've talked a couple of times with Caitlin and really done a lot of learning about the rezoning process. And to me, I feel like the condition, the fact that you can't have a condition on the zoning is really problematic. And it's also really problematic that the preliminary designs that were provided by the owner and developer don't have to be adhered to in any way. He's actually told me privately that he plans to build more units than those preliminary designs. So I'm trying to be fair and respectful to everybody, but myself and my 19 neighbors are really ask you, like, at what point can we have traffic calming? Like how far does it have to go in order to have reasonable traffic speeds? Because there's going to be a lot more vehicles on our street, and there are also other developments that in our area that are very tall, that are brand new, and so it's changing the character of the neighborhood. So I understand that there are a lot of I'm not going to discuss height and setbacks and all those other things that I know that you have to consider. But I also wanted to say that my neighbor, who is the developer, who's the owner of those lots in question, said that he would be happy to sign on to this letter as well, that he also wants to see traffic calming. So my request to him would be that he would make some kind of attempt to engage in the neighborhood with some kind of neighborhood process to try and get input around, the whatever kind of green spaces or, some of the design elements, that there might be a two-way dialogue between him and our neighborhood. I see Miss Mayor Engen has his hand raised, so I don't know if I should stop.
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go right ahead and finish up.
So I just also want to say that I am also a member of the Franklin to Fort Neighbors in Action, which is a neighborhood group that has been started in the last couple of years. I wasn't involved at the very beginning, but what I understood is that the people who started it felt like the neighborhood council process was really not user-friendly. And so that was one of the reasons why there, needed to be a separate, and also that the staff communication with the neighbors has not been very easy. So I do feel like I've had great staff support and communication with transportation department and with planning department and with people supporting the city council. But for me, I just want to say that learning to step up and speak out is daunting. And I hear that from my neighbors as well. And I understand that there was a training for how the city works in 2019 and 2020. And if we could have another one of those, Heather Harp, I think that you were kind of behind that. I just want to say thank you for that. And I think that's most of what I wanted to say, but I appreciate you. I'm not myself and my immediate neighbors and the Franklin to Fort Neighbors in Action, none of us are formally opposing this rezoning, but we have a lot of concerns, and particularly about traffic calming. The Neighbors in Action also has a whole list of concerns about development in general in the Franklin to Fort neighborhood, involving green spaces and how alternative modes of transportation are being supported with our developments, and how height decisions are being made, and how cultural, historical character is being appreciated as we increase the housing that we need so much. So we're not opposed to building more housing, but we as Franklin DeFort Neighbors in Action feel like there needs to be ways for us as neighbors to have input and perhaps to a neighborhood plan and that kind of thing. So thank you.
Well, thank you for providing the comment and for your written comment, and there's a lot of follow-up items here, so I'd encourage you to watch the discussion. And again, I apologize. I was trying to be efficient with our agenda, and I'm sorry for causing you to miss the discussion. But do please, if you have additional comments based on that, please do get in touch via email or voicemail at 552-6012. Mayor, you have a comment?
Yeah, and I don't intend to prolong this discussion. I really want to thank Ms. Mish for her comments, which were very thoughtful, and wanted her to know that we don't have to wait to have a conversation about traffic calming based on this rezoning. That can happen at any time, and we likely need to do we likely need to do some more outreach to neighborhoods. It's super challenging. Folks tend not to pay attention until there's a catalytic event. But we stand ready to help neighborhoods with traffic calming and doing our best to address these issues. These are going to happen again and again and again, and we may be at a point where we need to refine some of our processes. But in the meantime, we will always have this tension between our need to develop on already existing infrastructure to support the housing need in the community, and council's job here is to sort that. But none of this this can all be overcome. It just can't be overcome as a function of a rezoning hearing.
Thanks, Mayor. Would any other members of the audience like to provide comment? Okay, seeing none. Oh, Dennis Lower. Dennis, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, I just unmuted.
Okay, we can hear you.
Can you? Okay. Yes, my name is Dennis Lower. I'm the owner, my wife and I are, of the Schilling and Dearborn Street properties. And I'm a building contractor. I have had my construction business in that shop on Schilling Street since 1999, when we purchased the property from T&T Construction. And prior to us owning it, it was it had been a race car building shop, construction shop, automotive, and so anyway, our whole dream about staying in Missoula after we retire was one day I was just going to tear the shop down and we were going to build a big house there. So anyway, that kind of changed a few years ago. I bought the Dearborn Street property, the 5 lots, which had a pretty dilapidated building on it, 6 unit apartment building that was actually a building that was moved from Fort Missoula. It was a barracks, and it was moved over onto the site. And my neighbor directly next door to me, Frank Platts, had been renting that for years to some people that paid him sometimes for rent and sometimes didn't. And one of them, we think, maybe burned his shop down a number of years ago. But so he was kind of sick and tired of it. And so he sold us the property. And I didn't really know what I was going to do with it, but we cleared everybody out of there and then tore the building down. We had to get it. Well, first of all, we had the Fort people take a look at it to see if they wanted it. And take anything they wanted, and the building had been pretty much any historical value had been either covered up or kind of ruined by remodels and stuff. So we ended up having an asbestos abatement done to the building, and then had it tore down about December 2 years ago. Anyway, so then try to decide what to do with it. We looked into maybe putting another 6-unit apartment building there, and it's tough to try to make that work out. And so that's where we came up with this rezone. We'd like to increase the density. We envision townhouses. So I know that people are been concerned about height, and townhouses don't really lend themselves to 4 stories. They pretty much a garage with 2 stories above is what we're looking at doing. Where the Schilling Street properties at, the old shop building, probably keep that around for a few more years, and at least until I decide to retire, and then maybe put some apartments or something in there. But I don't see this as a real high. I mean, I don't think we're going to get anywhere near the allowable density. We're kind of looking at 14 to 16 units probably on the entire property. And my wife and I will definitely be building a unit for ourselves when we retire. We'll sell our house in the South Hills and move there. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to let you know, I mean, we're very attached to the neighborhood, having been there for 20 some years. I know lots and lots of the neighbors. Some of them have been there as long as we have. Some are new, but consider, many of them really good friends. It's really a supportive neighborhood. People really look out for each other. People have looked out for me. And, so like I said, that's where we want to retire and where we want to live at some point. So, and I realize, with a rezone, hey, anything could happen, but that's our initial intentions anyway for right now. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments and for the project background. We appreciate that. Okay, I don't see anyone else in the audience who has their hand up. We do have a full agenda, so I'm going to move us along, and I'll watch for other members joining, and we'll make sure that we take comment again. This is not a decision, an action item today. This will be back for final consideration on Monday, November 29th. And thank you for all the comments and discussion today. So we'll move on next to our West Broadway Community Master Plan. Annette, I imagine you're introducing this item?
Yes.
Okay, go right ahead.
Thank you. I'm Annette Marchessault. I am a project manager with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, and I've been the city's project manager for the West Broadway project, which has funding both from the MRA and a Big Sky Trust Fund grant that was obtained through the Business Improvement District and the Missoula Economic Partnership. And at this point, I'd like Rob Pietkowski, if you could elevate him to a panelist. Rob is with Dover Cole and Partners, our urban design consultants for this master plan. Dover Cole, you may recall, also did the downtown master plan update and the North Riverside Parks and Trails master plan. They're very familiar with our community. And I feel very sensitive to the sort of urban design that fits well within our community. So I'd like to have Rob do a presentation of the master plan, and then we can open it up for questions. Procedurally, this will, and you probably all are aware of this, will then go forward for public hearing on December 6th at the full city council. And then we'd ask council to take action on December 13th. So today is presentation, questions and answers, and then we'll proceed with the process from there. So Rob, with that.
Thank you, Annette. And thank you for everyone taking your time and allowing us to present on the West Broadway Community Master Plan. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, so everyone should now be able to see the presentation. Is that correct? Great. So again, my name is Rob Pietkowski. I'm town planner, urban designer, and project manager at Dover Cohen Partners. We've been working very closely with Annette at the MRA, as well as staff at the Business Improvement District and the local community in creating this master plan over the past year. Plan is funded through the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, as well as with a trust, the Big Sky Trust Fund, providing a planning grant. I'd like to thank everyone on our steering committee who has been involved and spending a lot of time and effort in helping us craft and develop this plan over the past year. We have representatives from business and property owners, city administration, including the mayor, several city council members, community members from the Community Planning, Development and Innovation Department, Department of Public Works, myself and Jason King, principal at Dover Cohen Partners, Linda McCarthy at the Business Improvement District, representatives from the Economic Partnership, the Redevelopment Agency, Montana Department of Transportation, and the North Side West Side Neighborhood Council. We've also held many meetings with various stakeholder groups, including business and property owners within the study area, as well as adjacent to the study area, developers, educational and social service providers, financial institutions, housing advocates, neighborhood residents, and technical meetings with Parks and Recreation and Parks and Environmental and Transportation and Public Safety. Our community and planning process has been quite involved, starting with a 5-day virtual design charrette back in April, which is really where we developed the framework for the plan and the big ideas, which I'll be presenting in just a few moments. There's 2 interactive project websites available that have been updated continuously to gather feedback and provide information on the planning process and drafts of the plan. Printed hard copies of the initial and final drafts are available at several locations throughout town. We also have a social media and direct email plan and been advocating through there and sending information out. We had an informational booth at the North Side West Side Block Party in October. And then we had 2 virtual public input sessions on both the initial draft and the final draft on October 7th and November 9th, respectively. And we've created a neighborhood survey in collaboration with Crew. So MRA and Crew worked together to create a physical hard copy of a survey to distribute door to door throughout the area. And it's been very successful, I think. We've got a lot of responses, over 66 so far, and it's been a great way to reach additional people. And there's been communication between myself and our team with MRA. Again, this is an overview of the project timeline. We began back in February with the kickoff and analysis, moved into the charrette in April, spent a lot of time drafting the plan. This schedule, if you've seen it earlier on, it looks slightly different. We've extended the process a couple of months to accommodate additional meetings and more input, and working very closely with Crew to craft new ways of reaching a broader spectrum of people within the immediate area. And it's been very helpful. We got a lot of great input, and I hope you'll see that in this presentation. So with that, we've spoken to over 340 people so far, individuals, whether it's at the kickoff meeting or during the charrette or other meetings we held or responding to our online surveys and events. We did a one-word card, and this is quite interesting. Basically, people that would respond online to the website with one word that comes to mind about the West Broadway area now. The more times a word was submitted, the bigger it is shown here. And so you can see the words that are biggest: potential and forgotten. Those are the things that people mention the most. You also see undeveloped, riverfront, floodplain, dumpy, sketchy, but also affordable. So these are things that people are thinking of the area as today. And we similarly ask one word that comes to mind about the West Broadway area in the future. And here the words are the opposite. You see gateway and affordable, you see community and vibrant and bustling, walkable, housing and reimagined, opportunities and equitable and hopeful and alive. And so these are the guiding principles to help us really understand what the area could be like and to give us inspiration as we started our planning process back in April. There was a community image survey that was available online. This allowed us to get input from those responding on building types and commercial uses and street types and trails, types of public spaces and civic buildings. A virtual charrette had a work in progress presentation. During the charrette week, we essentially drafted the first draft of the plan, focusing on the 5 big ideas and the framework that we then fleshed out over the following months. On that Friday, at the work in progress, we presented everything that we had completed during that week, including these images shown to the right. And we asked those in attendance at that presentation what they thought of those ideas. And these same questions were posted to the project website. At the end of that presentation, we asked, based on what you heard, did you think the draft plan is on the right track? And at that time, on April 9th, 80% said yes or probably yes. At our presentation, virtual public presentation of the draft plan last month on October 7th, we asked the same question after presenting the first draft of the plan, first complete draft of the plan. And again, we had 80% of those in attendance that were voting or responding to our survey question responded yes or probably yes. And we've been compiling all this information and keeping tabs of how many people we've been speaking to, what type of information we'll be getting. And that's also available in the report, including over 2,500 unique visitors to the project website. Our last piece on the public involvement process, the neighborhood survey, partnership between Crew and MRA, asked a lot of very specific questions and honed in on key issues and key concerns that members of the community might have. And it's very interesting. Over the 60 responses that we had, around 88% of those responding did not participate in other events, including some of the live in-person events and the various meetings that were held virtually. But nonetheless, 89% were supportive of the recommendations for mixed-use walkable neighborhood center as shown in the plan. Now what I'll do is go through the final draft of the community master plan and its key concepts. Just to remind you all, if you're not familiar, the study area is roughly 15 acres between West Broadway Street and Clark Fork River, North Russell Street and North California Street. It's located less than a mile from the heart of downtown, has connections along the Ron's River Trail. It's within both an urban renewal district and federal opportunity zones. And it's at the intersection of some of Missoula's main streets. Part of the impetus for this plan was this area was looked at in some detail during the downtown master planning process. So here's a spread from that report. You can see that in the downtown master plan, it talked about new housing opportunities in this area, street-oriented buildings facing West Broadway Street, wide sidewalks and street furniture, intersection redesigns and improving pedestrian crossings, extending the riverfront trail and providing affordable retail and restaurant space. Since this plan was adopted several years ago, quite a bit has changed. The city has acquired property within the area. And so that was a large part of the impetus to move forward, combined with it being located within an urban renewal district and a opportunity zone. And so this plan now provides, still at the planning level, master planning level, but more specific guidance on what the future of this area can be to provide guidance to private and public investment. So the plan has 5 big ideas. And these form the overall framework for the plan. And as specific details change, these 5 big ideas should still hold true and be used to guide any changes that may happen in details as things are implemented. The first is build the next great Missoula neighborhood center. The second big idea is to be a good neighbor and respect local businesses currently on site. The third is to connect to the river and complete the path system. The fourth is to help solve housing affordability and commercial space affordability issues. And the fifth is to create a unique entry experience to urban Missoula. Each of the big ideas on the report has a spread that illustrates the key concepts and elements and policy recommendations of that big idea. Big idea one is to build the next Great Missoula Neighborhood Center, and it should become a complete urban place, be the next hip neighborhood, create high quality, welcoming public spaces for all, and create safe, comfortable, and interesting streets. And this really focuses on a lot of the physical form and urban design of what the area could be, with guidance and recommendations on building placement, fronts and backs, how streets should be designed and things that should be incorporated into them, building to street relationship or building frontages, and where parking should be located and how it should fit within the urban context and form. One of the key ideas or concepts from the plan is to create a new main street and public square. And this would provide an additional connection from the West Side neighborhood to the north and down southward towards the Clark Fork River. It breaks up the large Missoula water block into two smaller blocks that are easy to walk around, providing additional on-street parking spaces, and creates new frontage for mixed-use development, mixed-use buildings and shops and businesses and homes to front on. West Broadway Street is a state Department of Transportation road, and so how much influence the city has over its design and how much of a pedestrian-friendly space it can become is more open to conversation between MDT and the city. So by creating a perpendicular street just off of Missoula West Broadway Street, can really focus in on creating a great space, something that the city would have more control over and can really hone in on the details to get it right. The plan talks about the existing streets within the area and proposes new street sections that add traffic calming, street trees, on-street parking, and to create a little more complete streets as opposed to the existing ones now. A lot of these changes are incremental in nature and for the most part leave the curb-to-curb dimensions as is. So that was Hillsdale, again, Cedar Street, and North California Street. So utilizing tree islands and planting islands to help narrow the street in certain locations to add more green infrastructure and more trees, and to widen sidewalks when possible, or to create new ones where they don't exist. Second big idea is to be a good neighbor and respect local businesses currently on site. This includes strategies to retain valued businesses. This area is already home to a lot of businesses, and while the plan proposes long-term changes to the area, it's up to those individual property owners and those businesses whether or not they want to change. The plan wants to provide tools and opportunities for them to do so if they choose, but allow them to remain as is if that's what they'd like to do. And the plan also recommends becoming a local destination, a place that focuses on local serving uses and amenities, but at the same time could attract a wider range of Missoulians from across the city to visit this area and to enjoy the new spaces created. And through the survey between MRA and crew, we got a lot of feedback on the specific types of uses desired by the local community. Those include local restaurants and cafes, daycare, a laundromat, various community spaces, a corner store, a grocer, art studios, an incubator, and shared kitchen spaces. The plan talks about encouraging local ownership and establishing a maker district. That was a recommendation coming from the downtown master plan and something that we heard a lot across the virtual charrette as well, that there's a lot of innovation and entrepreneurs in this area, people trying to start new businesses. There's already some light industrial uses in this area, and those things should continue and be supported. In that end, the plan recommends some specific strategies to help local small businesses to grow and to, for those that are there today, to maintain their existence and to help support new ones that come in. Big idea 3 is to connect to the river and complete the path system. This includes increasing access to parks and nature. One of the key design moves of the plan is to create this new long green, a new green access from West Broadway Street down to the river. And this provides a new pedestrian connection along with a proposed crossing of West Broadway Street around Burn Street. That'll provide access from the north side, west side neighborhood, a safer place to cross West Broadway Street through this new proposed area, this new proposed development, and down to the trail system in the California Street bike pedestrian bridge to point south. The plan recommends that public space and open space, whether it's some that's proposed here or required through development of residential buildings, that be consolidated into larger contiguous spaces as illustrated here in the illustrator plans and throughout the document, and that those spaces be open to the public and be truly public spaces. Plan recommends connecting to the river and completing the path system, providing shade trees and pedestrian scaled lighting along Ron's River Trail in this area, and then completing the gap in Ron's River Trail between Burton Street and Orange Street to further the connection between downtown and this area. And the plan also recommends to build sustainably, to look into incentives for LEED development, including on-site photovoltaics and rain gardens and green roofs and other elements to reduce the reliance on fossil fuels and to help the city meet its renewable energy goals. In terms of better utilizing the river, the city is working, and I think it's completed now, acquisition of the easement for the Flynn Lowney ditch. And so that opens up new possibilities for what this area could become. So in some sections where the city owns the land underneath the ditch as well, those can be transformed into new park spaces, or in other areas it can be utilized to help encourage development that meets city goals, such as providing affordable housing. Next to the site is Downtown Lions Park. The 2020 adopted plan shows community gardens and a playground there. So our plan that we're showing now for West Broadway area recommends also community gardens, but instead of a full playground, just smaller climbing areas or something to complement the great plan that has been created for Downtown Lions Park, since it's just a block away. The Long Green includes several different sections. The first here is a little more urban section, a place that would become great addresses for new businesses and shops or community spaces, place for outside dining for businesses to spill out of their spaces onto the sidewalk into the public space and have outside dining, which has become really important, especially over the last year. But also, perhaps just as important, if not more important, is to have seating and public space and areas for people to relax who aren't necessarily eating or dining at one of the restaurants or cafes. Just anyone from the public is welcome to feel comfortable and have a place to sit and relax and enjoy the experience of being in the public realm. Further down towards the river, the plan envisions again, either daycare or residential uses fronting the space here, a small play area, and then a new overlook on the river to provide more access or better views to the river and a larger connection with it. And in Downtown Lions Park, the plan includes river access. For low impact development, the plan recommends several strategies for both public development and private development, including bioretention areas, permeable paving, constructed wetlands, green roofs, and so on. And the plan also talks about bikeability. So not just creating new connections, but ensuring that there's ample bike parking, both public bike parking and private long-term parking within buildings. In terms of sustainability, the plan supports the efforts underway for zero waste facilities and reducing energy consumption, important programs and goals that the city has. Big idea 4 is perhaps one of the most important parts of the plan, which is to help solve housing and rental space affordability issues. This includes living space and places for all and affordable housing. The plan is not going to solve the affordability issues of Missoula, but the hope is that it could take steps in the right direction and provide guidance for further similar projects in other places. As you're all aware, housing costs in Missoula have increased tremendously from around $200,000 the median home price 10 years ago to over $400,000 today, which is a substantial increase. So working closely with the community and various groups, and we've come up with these strategies for affordable housing in the West Broadway area. And I want to thank all those that have submitted comments to us between the first draft and the draft that we're looking at today. I think they've really gone a long way in helping to flesh out this section in more detail. So these include recommendations for zoning and planning, project approvals, including streamlining development approvals and entitlement processes. Actually, just to clarify, so all these strategies on this page and the next one are meant as recommendations and strategies to use for the creation of permanently affordable housing. Impact fees, for the city to explore ways to reduce or reimburse impact fees for buildings that include affordable housing, and to look at various financing and funding mechanisms, such as low-income housing tax credits, utilizing TIF funds to construct public infrastructure and open space, as well as using TIF funds to incentivize affordable housing on privately held parcels, making use of the Missoula Affordable Housing Trust Fund and New Markets tax credits. Probably one of the most important things is the city-owned land. So here the city owns Missoula Water, some adjacent parcels, Sleepy Insight, and portions of the underlying area underlying Flynn Mountain Ditch. When talking about constructing buildings and development, labor is a big cost, materials and land, and costs of, as well as the process of designing and going through the approvals process. And all these costs eventually do get passed on to those that buy or live or rent in that new development. So the city has a unique position here to leverage the land to reduce that cost to the developer and to have that cost savings be passed on to the end user. And there's several partnerships recommended and strategies to explore. This can include public-private partnerships or joint development with the city and private developer, where the land can be leased or sold at a low or reduced cost in return for the provision of permanently affordable housing within the development, as well as permanently affordable or non-residential community or commercial space. City can also partner with a nonprofit developer or community land trust for permanently affordable for sale home ownership opportunities, as well as to coordinate with the Missoula Housing Authority. The plan also talks about different tenant support and assistance and has several affordable housing targets. So the income target ranges are based on area median income or AMI. And the plan recommends 18 to 25 units or 35% for households earning up to 30% AMI, 35% of the units for households earning between 30 and 80% of that AMI, and 30% of the affordable units for households earning between 80 and 120% of AMI, for a total of 50 to 70 affordable units, permanently affordable units. And big idea 5, the last one is to create a unique entry experience to urban Missoula. First impressions matter. For many, this is their first experience when you're arriving from the west to Missoula. You're not quite sure where you are until you really get to the core of downtown. And there's great neighborhoods and great places and communities along the whole way. And this could really help to emphasize that along West Broadway. And the plan also looks at West Broadway Street itself. There's plans underway between Montana Department of Transportation. They're reconstructing Russell Street and portions of West Broadway Street. And so this plan provides guidance on the community vision for what the community and city would like to see in the redevelopment of West Broadway Street through Montana Department of Transportation. This vision is something that would require coordination and ongoing negotiations, and provides a template and provides further support for the city's desired cross-section and design for West Broadway Street. When we look into it in a little more detail, a couple key things are providing a safe crossing at Burn Street, which would connect down to the Long Green. This could include some sort of signal, like a hawk signal, to allow for safer access, as well as a roundabout at North California Street, Toole, and West Broadway Street. Initially, the plan wasn't really looking at West Broadway Street because it lies outside the control of the city. But essentially every meeting we had, valid concerns we heard were the difficulty of crossing from the north side, west side neighborhoods down to the river and getting across West Broadway Street. And so we took a look at it and providing this guidance, working closely with city staff. Just a few more slides. This is the illustrative plan. And what the illustrative plan does is illustrate the potential future build out for the West Broadway area. It provides an overall goal and overall vision of what the area could be. Really, the main point is highlighting key concepts in terms of urban form, how buildings should relate to other buildings, how buildings should relate to open and public spaces, where public spaces should be. But ultimately, what gets built will probably differ from exactly what's shown here, especially on areas that are privately held. The plan hopes to provide guidance and ideas, and starts as a conversation, or as a starting point for conversations and further design as projects get implemented and brought up. The dark gray buildings are existing buildings. The green areas are parks and open space. Downtown Lions Park in the bottom right, as well as the new Long Green. And the reddish pink buildings are new proposed buildings. It's important to take a look at the phasing. So this is the existing conditions. There's a lot of surface parking, and you can see these areas identified in the orange line. These are areas currently owned by the city, and the plan focuses its main efforts on what can happen within those areas. In the initial phase, we can imagine West Broadway Street being reconstructed with the roundabout, better bus stops, and a new building where the Sleepy Inn site is. Next, when Missoula Water relocates, you can imagine that area transforming and becoming the new center for the neighborhood, a new commercial area, an area with mixed use, mixed income housing, and various community and commercial spaces. And really within this phase, just on the city-owned parcels, you can start to create a new place, something with a unique identity, and a place where people want to go and spend time in. And this was set up in such a way that even if the private areas around it don't develop or don't develop for many years, that there would be enough of a space here, really having that building face to building face design across the plaza area. Next, you can imagine the long green continuing down towards the river and completing that connection, as well as the land around Western Cider redeveloping into new uses. And finally, in the long term, through various incentives or property owners wishing to redevelop, you can imagine the whole area becoming a complete place. Bringing it all together, this proposed development program really focuses on phase 3, which is this one, in terms of what it's recommending. And there's ample opportunity for additional housing and other development as time goes on based on private owners and what they'd like to see on their properties. So the development plan calls for 20,000 square feet for retail and restaurants, 10 to 15,000 for offices or community spaces, 100 to 130 market rate townhomes and apartments, and 50 to 70 permanently affordable units targeted for the various income brackets. Plan also recommends on-street parking and surface parking. In the future, as this area develops and builds out, parking can become more of a concern, as what we've been hearing. There's room in some of the private properties for parking garages, if that's something that's needed for larger developments later on. And the plan also emphasizes the need to move towards the MPO's ambitious mode share shift in terms of increasing the amount of trips taken by walking and biking and transit. And so that's why the plan puts a lot of emphasis on incorporating high quality facilities for pedestrians and cyclists and transit users to make that a choice-worthy mode for getting to and from this area. In the last few slides, the plan includes an implementation matrix and process section that explores and explains how the plan would be implemented, who would be responsible for what, the role of the MRA and community redevelopment agencies, and the development of public property versus changes on private property, and how that all ties back to the illustrative plan phasing. And the matrix of strategies summarizes the key ideas throughout the plan and organizes them by big idea. We've had several presentations so far for the approvals process, big board presentation yesterday, presentation last night to the planning board. We'll have further presentations this week to the MRA board and a neighborhood forum, and anticipating going to city council in December. And lastly, to meet the requirements of the Big Sky Trust Fund, submitting the plan to them to secure the rest of the funding. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. And thank you again for your time this afternoon, and look forward to our conversation.
Great. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. So do we have any questions to start us off, or any comments from council members? Amber.
Yeah, thanks. That was a great presentation. Really, really interesting and kind of exciting to envision that area. I would like to go through the presentation in more detail, though, is obviously trying to follow and read is hard. Is that going to be, maybe you said this on the Engage Missoula side, or are you going to attach, can we attach it to the agenda somewhere? I'd just like to go through the full presentation. I don't have any questions at this point.
Yeah, sure. So the plan is currently on the Envision West Broadway website, and we can make a PDF of this presentation available to that website as well. And I think I'll send it to Annette, and perhaps she can distribute it to you all in addition.
Great, thank you. Amber, do you have additional questions? Okay, Heather.
Thanks, Jordan. Rob, great presentation. I think what we see that comes out of your agency is always really well thought out. One of the questions I have for you, and you touched on it very briefly, but it's the section of land east of California Street where we have some existing businesses and group homes in particular. And I know there's been for many years connectivity issues in this area and access to being able to get onto West Broadway. Is there any conversation that's going on in terms of trying to create some existing connections between along Cedar Street in through those parking lots over to Burton and perhaps even a little further east?
Thank you for the kind words, and I think that largely goes back to the community here in Missoula, and very involved in the process, and a lot of the great ideas in the plan comes from the conversations we had. So we didn't look much east of California Street in this planning process. We did hear of the need for greater connections, and so that's why the plan does recommend the roundabout at the intersection with West Broadway Street, Toole Ave, and California Street to allow for better traffic flow as well as safer and more convenient ways for pedestrians to cross instead of having to wait long periods of time at the signal, and as well as the connection across West Broadway Street. But we do not really look at connections going further east. If you have, yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just had a number of folks kind of call out some time back about the difficulty that they have when they are picking up typically disabled people from those group homes and trying to navigate traffic on Broadway. Often feels like they're taking life in their hands, and they end up having to go behind the old motel, the City Lodge there, and that is it's just a mess. And so I know what I'm talking about is not necessarily carved out in this particular project, but Annette, if you can just kind of keep that at the forefront of this project too. The proximity just makes sense if we're trying to improve this neighborhood, to just think a little bit more eastward.
Yeah, we appreciate those comments, and I think the roundabout would go a long way in terms of improving the access from California Street back onto either turning left or turning right onto West Broadway Street, or making the turn onto Toole Ave by slowing down the traffic and providing easier access to the area for those driving. So that's one of the reasons why it's proposed in this plan.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Mirta?
I have a comment and then a quick question. I just want to say thank you. This is, such a comprehensive look at a fairly small part of our town when we look at compared to our growth policy, for example, that is super comprehensive because it looks at everything. But this has some really great big ideas, connections to the river, ways to complete our streets for safer multimodal transportation, a lot of public involvement. And I just want to thank Annette for your willingness to work with the neighbors and include an extra survey. Also, thanks for to the Downtown Missoula Partnership for your collaboration and guidance on this, and Rob and everyone with the consultant team. You guys did such a good job of balancing all of us crazy Missoulians and our last minute ideas and comments. So I really appreciate that. I guess one you might have touched on this, but I wanted to know how this will be informing our zoning review. And, clearly this is happening before that, but I think some really good concepts and ideas have come out of this plan. So just wondering how that's gonna intersect that process too.
Right. So as of now, pretty much most of the site is within zoning districts that would allow for everything proposed to be built there. They're relatively mixed use, high density areas that support development up to pretty tall at 10 stories. The plan doesn't envision stuff going that tall, but that's what the zoning allows. The exception is Blue Ribbon Auto is currently a PUD. And so if they were to ever redevelop, they would likely have to go through a process to update their PUD or rezoning to a new district. The area is also within Design Excellence Overlay, the Gateway Overlay, which provides additional guidance and quality control over the types of development that occurs on that site. I'm not too familiar with the city's ongoing rezoning process, but perhaps this plan can provide guidance along with the downtown master plan on overall urban design concepts that relate to zoning in terms of building frontages, massing and form and setbacks, as well as uses. But a lot of these downtown districts are already pretty progressive in terms of allowing the mix of uses, not requiring parking in many areas. And so I think that's a good foundation to start with.
Thank you. And if you need a motion to set public hearing, I'm happy to do that, but I would also defer to the ward representative on this. So.
Okay. Heidi, do you want to have the honors as the ward representative?
Since I'm the only one here. Just kidding. Sure. I also just want to say that this was a really amazing process, and that it's really great to see, as we see each presentation and go to each stakeholder meeting, just to see all the changes that have been made along the way to make this a really amazing, really awesome plan. And I think I just want to point out that the sustainability section on this plan is pretty unique in plans that I've seen so far in my time on council, down to even suggesting, the recycling capacity that commercial buildings should have based on square footage, really detailed things that I think will move us forward towards lots of our plans, not just housing, but also our climate goals and our zero waste goals. And hopefully at least a large portion of what is envisioned here will actually be built. So I'll make the recommended motion, and thank you.
Thank you. That motion is in order. I completely agree. I think this has been a really innovative process, and I want to commend Annette and the Dover Cole team and Linda and the downtown team and everyone for all of the work on this. And I also want to really thank the North Side West Side crew for their involvement. They really put a lot of effort into helping turn the neighborhood out for to provide comment and to provide input on the plan, and that was really positive. And the West Side is a neighborhood that is sometimes difficult to reach through our conventional methods of outreach, and so it's really helpful to have a neighborhood group involved and building on our other outreach tools. I also want to say that this was a really great hybrid of some in-person opportunities, some great online engagement, and really just a great process all around. And lastly, it's exciting to have a master plan for an area, for a district that we control so much land in. And as the former Sleepy Inn site is redeveloped and the Missoula water site, there's just a ton of opportunity to really be a leader as the city in all of our goals in this area. Are there additional questions or comments? Seeing none, would anyone from the public like to comment? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion on the floor to adopt this, to set a public hearing and to adopt this plan as an amendment to the downtown master plan, which in turn is an amendment to the our Missoula growth policy. We can have a roll call vote on the motion, please.
Anderson,
Yes.
Becerra,
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Merritt,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Basika,
Yes.
and West.
Yes.
All right, I have 10 yeses, no nos, and 0 abstains.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. We can put that on the consent agenda as well. And we'll move along on our agenda. And thank you, Annette and Rob and Linda for the presentation. We'll move along to item 3.3, and this is a resolution delaying East Missoula annexation. And Mayor Engen is here to introduce that item. Mayor?
Thank you very much, and I am your staff report as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon again. Council members, what is before you is a resolution to delay annexation of East Missoula until 2034, or at least the potential for annexation to 2034. As you'll see in the resolution and in the referral, we entered into an interlocal agreement with the East Missoula Sewer District in 2000 as a function of providing that municipal utility to that geographic area. As a function of that, we anticipated a waiver of protest of annexation and some intention, at least, to think about annexation in 2024. Probably 9 months or a year ago, as time flies, representatives from the sewer district and the community visited with me and requested that we consider an extension for a couple of reasons. One is the community is, really coalescing around some planning processes, and those processes are still in play. And I think annexation or the potential for annexation before some of those processes come to an end throws a wrench in the works. The second reason is that as a function of those processes, there may be grant opportunities at a variety of levels that East Missoula would not be eligible for in the case of annexation. So based on that request and those factors, as well as the fact that East Missoula has significant infrastructure needs based on our standards, and frankly, a limited tax base to provide that infrastructure and additional services, it was pretty easy for me to recommend to you that we extend that annexation opportunity another decade. I think there are far more winners than losers. In fact, I don't think there are any losers here as a function of this extension, and I hope that you will look upon it favorably. I know Mr. Ballas is here representing folks in East Missoula, and there may be others who I'm sure would be more than willing to answer your questions, as am I, but that's what I have for you today.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And we do have a few very patient folks from East Missoula here, and thank you for bearing with us with the rest of our agenda. Sandra.
Thanks. What initiated the annexation process in the beginning? Was it folks from East Missoula that wanted to do that, or was it the city wanting to do that?
So as a function of extending the utility, Ms. Vasika, East Missoula didn't have a sewer. And we typically don't extend sewer to areas that that will not eventually be part of the city of Missoula. So as a function of that extension of our wastewater facility, we entered into an agreement that would allow for annexation in 2024.
Thank you.
Okay, Heather.
Having been working out in East Missoula for the last roughly 2 years, a number of times I've been invited to the East Missoula Community Council conversations. And as I've shared with Lee Bridges, who is on the call today, there's definitely always been concern about this increased cost to this demographic. And I think, as the mayor has really illustrated today, there will be a time, but it's not today. And I think that bodes well for this community to be able to continue to offer some of the most affordable housing that we have in our community, while looking forward and planning accordingly so that we can make sure we get that proper infrastructure in when the time is right.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Is there anyone from the public, Jack or Lee or anyone want to comment? Okay, Lee, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm Lee Bridges. I'm on the East Missoula Sewer Board with Jack Ballas, who is our chairman. Thanks, Jack. I'm also the chairman of the East Missoula Community Council. We brought this before Mayor Ingen here back in June, and thank you, Mayor Ingen. You did an excellent job of putting this together, and I really want to thank Jessica Miller for writing up that resolution if she's the one that did it. She did a terrific job. Based on that waiver of protest we signed in order to hook up with the city sewer, the city agreed to be able to furnish us with the municipal services at our current standards, i.e. snow plowing, pothole repair, fire response time, etc. More importantly, we'd like to know if it'll give us our voice in governance that we currently have and be able to get done what we've been able to do in recent years. As a very progressive and dedicated community council out here, we have a great working relationship with the county and we're getting a lot done. If we get annexed before we get these projects completed, can the city council do as much for our community and be as effective as we are? I kind of doubt that, but only because of the position that we are currently in. We've been very proactive in improving our community, including working with the East Missoula Highway 200 corridor study to upgrade and update our main thoroughfare through our community. That's going to enable us to apply for county, state, and federal funds that I don't feel would be available through the city. We have spent years working with the county on providing vision on our future, on what our future will look like with the new growth plan that we've enacted. And we remain quite active in preserving our unique character that we have out here. We've adopted a new and accurate live make county zoning designation for our own zoned areas that we are currently in the process of writing and approving the text to describe that. We want to instill the success of this designation before being annexed. We've also been working with the MCPS to reopen Mount Jumbo Elementary School based on the resolution we encouraged them to adopt during their school boundary study a few years ago. Although admittedly, the progress has currently slowed because of the pandemic, we will get back to that. We will be using our remaining sewer funds to upgrade our alleyways and some street crossing impacted by the construction of the sewer collection system. And we want the opportunity to be able to get that done. So we're actually in the process of creating so much in our community right now, and we have the power to do that. We already have these projects in the works. Give us the time to execute them and get them finished. We have some pretty lofty goals you're probably not even aware of, and we're just asking for the time to complete them while we have this chance. I think we are better positioned and focused to accomplish these goals. Give us the extra 10 years to get it done. We need time to execute our growth plan that we've spent years creating and work with you to elevate our tax base before you annex us. Let us complete our initiative so that when we are annexed, we're coming in more as a benefit than a deficit. The growth plan, the corridor study, the zoning, the reopening of Mount Jumbo Elementary School, correcting some of our alleyways and roadways. Right now, that's not costing you a dime. Give us time to bring our community up to your standards. We've already demonstrated to you how proactively we've been working with the county to improve. Let us continue our initiatives. Our concern is that our initiatives will stall if annexed due to our transition into the city. And I'm going to make a quote that we came up with. Better for us to be an asset than a liability when you guys annex us. Right now, we have some high priority improvements that we want to execute and the opportunity to do that. If you can give us the time we need, I feel you'll be better off acquiring East Missoula into the city once we're awesome, rather than now when we'd be a problem child to you.
Great. Thank you, Lee. I appreciate those comments. And Jack, you're welcome to provide comment as well. You should be able to unmute yourself now, Jack.
Okay, are we there?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to thank Mayor Engen for taking this project on for us. I've been a resident out here since 1970. I've lived in Missoula since 1934, and I've seen a lot of changes. And I've been especially proud of the way Missoula has handled itself over the several decades that I've been here. And I'm glad that we can give us the chance to change East Missoula to what has been to what it could be in the future. And I thank everybody that's helped us along the way. So Lee has basically given you a pretty good update on our future endeavors, and I hope you take them to heart. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the comments. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to echo the appreciation that Ms. Bridges offered for Jessica Miller, who did all the work here and did a lot of coordination. And of course, thank the sewer district and community council folks for their thoughtful approach to all of this.
Thanks, Mayor. Okay, I would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution. Julie.
I would be happy to make the recommended motion. I think I appreciate all the hard work that everyone has put in here.
Great. Thank you. The motion is in order. So this is a resolution and would go, I guess, question, for the mayor or Jessica. Does this require a public hearing, or does this just go through our normal committee reports or consent agenda process?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. As a resolution, it does not require public hearing. It moves from committee to council floor at your will.
Perfect. So this would be up for consideration on the 29th as well. Any additional discussion on the motion? Any public comment that we haven't heard yet? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote on the motion.
Anderson.
Yes.
Becerra.
Yes.
Contos.
Yes.
Harp.
Yes.
Hess.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Merritt.
Yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Basika.
Yes.
And West.
Yes.
All right, 10 yeses, 0 nos, 0 abstain.
Okay, the motion passes and that'll go on our consent agenda. Thank you, Mayor and Jessica, for bringing that forward.
Thank you.
And now we can move on to our final item. And we don't have nearly as much time for this as I had intended, so we'll have to be efficient. We do have a presentation from the staff team that's been working on this with some updates, and so I'll turn it right over to staff, and then we can go through the discussion items. And so I'll turn it over to Madsen. Are you starting us off?
Yes, I am. Thank you. So first, I wanted to start and reintroduce everyone presenting today. From the Planning and Land Use team is Cassie Trepard, a planning supervisor, Spencer Stark, an associate planner, and I am Madsen Matthias, an assistant planner on the team. The team of us in CPDI have been collaborating on updates to our land use regulations with regard to cannabis uses since that recent ballot initiative was passed last November, and the bill is produced to allow for recreational cannabis use in the state. We are here to follow up on specific questions and concerns regarding the details of the proposed cannabis ordinance.
So to Spencer Stark for the record. So to recap, staff is proposing to amend Title 20 to address 4 impacts highlighted in the initial white paper released and along the public process and the myriad of presentations that we've given. The first is to align Title 20 definitions with the state definitions presented in House Bill 701 and reiterated in the newly adopted legislation. Second, we're proposing to prohibit commercial cultivation and manufacturing as a home occupation. Thirdly, to preserve a diverse mix of uses by implementing a 500-foot buffer between retail dispensaries. And finally, to limit non-transparent glazing to encourage street front interaction.
And Cassie Trepard for the record. Staff are recommending implementing a 500-foot buffer between dispensaries measured from parcel line to parcel line. This recommendation is in response to mapping showing an oversaturation of dispensaries in certain areas. The goal is to preserve a diverse mix of uses so that people in a particular area can access everyday services rather than only being able to access dispensaries in their area. Staff would like to recommend the minimum buffer necessary to meet the goal so that the ordinance is not overly restrictive. Next slide. So I've created some new maps with aerial imagery to give a better idea of exactly how the buffer works and what different distances mean on the ground. For the purpose of this explanation, we're acting as if downtown is starting with just one dispensary. The star on the map is the Cookies dispensary on Higgins Avenue, which you may be familiar with. It's very blue. The buffer is measured from the parcel line in all directions. And at 500 feet, the buffer covers about 4 downtown blocks. A dispensary would be able to locate at the edge of the red ring. Staff believe that within 4 downtown blocks, there is enough availability of space for a wide range of uses to locate. Next slide. So with a 600-foot buffer, dispensaries would be prohibited from locating in about 5 downtown blocks around the dispensary. From the Cookies dispensary, the buffer would extend across Broadway and down to Caris Park. Next slide. So at 700, or the 750-foot buffer covers approximately 11 downtown blocks. The buffer would extend about a block north of Broadway and nearly to Washington Street to the east. Next slide. So at 1,000 feet, which staff believe to be too restrictive, dispensaries would be prohibited in about 15 downtown blocks around this dispensary. The buffer would extend from Higgins out to Orange Street, north to about where Jimmy John's is located. To the south, the 1,000-foot buffer extends into the river about halfway. And to the east, the buffer extends past Washington Street toward the portion of downtown with a more residential form. Next slide. So here you can see the 500-foot buffer compared to the 1,000-foot buffer. Again, the 500-foot buffer covers about 4 city blocks, whereas the 1,000-foot buffer covers about 15 city blocks. Next slide. So this map shows downtown with the 1,000-foot buffer. The southern star is still the Cookies dispensary. With this buffer, a dispensary could locate at the edge of the Cookies buffer, where the northern star is shown. At 1,000 feet, if Cookies were the starting point, only 2 dispensaries would be permitted in the central downtown area. Considering all of the commercial spaces available in downtown, the goal of preserving a diverse mix of uses can be met with a smaller buffer. The 1,000-foot buffer appears overly restrictive when given the number of other uses that are often clustered downtown. This map is also meant to show how buffers can overlap because you would be placing it at the edge of one buffer. Next. Okay. And here you can see existing dispensaries shown as green dots and compare the 500-foot and 750-foot buffers. With the 750-foot, you see that more of downtown is covered. So at 500 feet, about 7 dispensaries would be permitted in the central business district if we are starting with a blank slate. At 600 feet, this number is reduced to about 5 dispensaries. The 750-foot buffer would permit about 3 dispensaries, and at 1,000 feet, only 1 or 2 dispensaries would be permitted, as you saw in the previous map.
All right, Madison Matthias for the record. The intent here is to identify the difference essentially in how the state is measuring their buffer from schools and places of worship versus how we are proposing to do it here at the city. With the city, you saw that we're using the actual buffer of the circle. So how the state defines their buffer is that the distance must be measured in a straight line, so no turning corners, no bending, from the center of the nearest entrance of the school or the place of worship to then the licensed cannabis business. So here's an example. First, I wanted to show the hip strip because it is a pretty dense mix of these 3 types of uses and specifically how the state would measure it. So showing with a triangle where that nearest entrance would be from the church or Hellgate High School, and then where that 500-foot straight line along that frontage reaches to. So you can see that it's not quite to any specific dispensary. You can show the next one. And then this is an example for C.S. Porter Middle School and other kind of similar situations with schools or places of worship that would be located along commercial corridors. Again, from that triangle, from that nearest entrance, measuring 500 feet in either direction as a straight line. Kind of gives an idea of exactly how the state would be identifying whether or not a dispensary or cannabis business would be in compliance with that buffer. So it is a different approach. You can go next. So then I also wanted to touch on non-conformities and non-conforming uses, just because of the difference of essentially when we implement this buffer, there will be some that we've seen in these maps that are overlapping or that are clustered closer together than that 500 feet. So throughout the process, we've run into a bit of confusion on what exactly this non-conforming standard means. Any businesses that have already been approved before these regulations are implemented will be able to continue operating at their current licensed address. If the dispensary moves and a different use comes into that space, then it loses non-conforming status. So at that point, a new business would not be able to move into the buffer. This does not mean a business could move to a different location within a buffer. They would only be allowed to stay at their current location or find a new location outside of the buffer. And all of the specifics of this are covered in Title 20, Chapter 20.80. Next.
As staff has alluded to, there have been some comments made regarding manufacturing of cannabis from some industry stakeholders, as well as driven by those comments, staff has followed up with our fire department to get a better understanding of the impacts of cannabis manufacture and the related impacts. This has led staff to changed their recommendation, and we'll be issuing a memo within the coming day with more information. But the impetus around this is that there are two broad categories of extractants for when examining, or extraction methodologies when examining cannabis manufacturing, or the manufacture of cannabis products. These would be concentrates. The first class is those that do not use flammable solvents. This could be anything from extracting THC and the surrounding compounds into an oil in your home, to using a CO2 system to extract concentrates. These impacts are not considered to be as hazardous as their flammable solvent counterparts, which is the second class of cannabis extraction. The extraction methodologies that utilize flammable solvents often involve high temperature and pressure of these flammable solvents and can pose a risk to the surrounding areas. Staff is proposing to allow for cannabis extraction that does not utilize flammable solvents as a limited manufacturing use, and then cannabis manufacture that involves using flammable solvents, as well as cannabis manufacture that does not, would be considered a general manufacturing use. This would result in a change to where certain extraction facilities could potentially be located, with the manufacturing methodologies that do not use flammable solvents being permitted within limited manufacturing districts, or as a limited manufacturing use, which would be a conditional use in B3 districts and permitted outright in all commercial and manufacturing districts. And then manufacturing or cannabis extraction that utilizes flammable solvents would be limited to our limited and heavy industrial zones, illustrated on the map in light pink and dark pink. This is just briefly reviewing the timeline for this item. Today we have an informational meeting to discuss some of the nuances of the proposals, and then we will be releasing a memo tomorrow describing the previous slides in more detail. And then there is a additional memo, if necessary, which will be taking into account the discussions that we have, with a final consideration on November 29th in front of City Council. The ordinance will go to effect at that final consideration, or after a decision at the final consideration, with business license renewal on May 2022. And then we're hoping for Title V revisions within 2022, again, as we've previously stated, with the goal of beginning our presentations in front of City Council at the end of January or early February. Throughout the process, we've received 5 public comments so far, one of which will be issued and sent to, on the agenda, or on the NeScribe shortly. This concludes staff's brief presentation. We're open to question and comment at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So a few matters of housekeeping. This meeting is scheduled until 3:15. I'm going to continue it beyond that. If folks have to leave, I understand that, but I don't want to shortchange our discussion today. There's quite a queue lining up, and so we'll work through those, and then if we need to have any discussion thematically around the areas that we've discussed, whether it's buffers or other things, we can do that. But we'll go through our queue. So first I've got Julie, followed by Heather.
All right, I'll try to be brief. My concern is about some of the existing uses that are not within the commercial zones or industrial zones. So staff was very kind to do some research into a couple of the dots on the map that they showed us last week that showed marijuana businesses within residential neighborhoods. And they sent along the business licenses for those couple that were in the Franklin to the Fort neighborhood. And so here's my question. Those business licenses were issued for people to produce medical marijuana in a home-based location. If I'm understanding things correctly, the production of medical marijuana is no longer going to be a thing, that it's all going to be commercial. So I guess maybe I need clarification on that point first. Will there continue to be a medical marijuana production?
Yes, there will be. Medical marijuana is still part of state code revolving around marijuana production. So there is still that class. In addition, our non-conforming section of Title 20 does allow for similar intensities. So as long as the scope of impacts do not change, then that is more of what we're concerned with. So if they transition into a commercial cannabis cultivation, we're more interested in the fact that they don't increase the degree of nonconformity by adding additional plants or by impacting the surrounding area in a greater degree. Perhaps, Cassie, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
I think that pretty well sums it up. Is though all businesses will be able to go to recreational, some may stay medical and they have the option to do so. Our proposed zoning code doesn't differentiate the two. And then Spencer is correct. Those home occupations that were already approved will be able to continue operating, but may not expand.
Are we obligated to grandfather in these uses?
Yes, under the Title 20 non-conforming section, that's what would apply. They will be allowed to continue until they abandon that use, unless we were to try to change that code section, which would impact a lot of different areas outside of this.
Okay, all right. I think that kind of covers it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. Heather, and then Sandra.
Thanks. One section I feel like I do not have a very good understanding on is section B3 of the exemption. And I'm wondering if you could pull that up from staff side. And maybe walk us through that a little bit, because I'm very unclear if that is basically telling all existing businesses that they are exempt from having to do glazing, or limit. Sorry, I gotta make sure I get this right. If they need to reduce the limitation of non-transparent glazing, if they have that in place already.
Yeah, see, oh, Spencer has it. Great. Yeah, so number 3, the exemption. So if they replace the glass or glazing or change openings, any of that, that's not exempt. That would be required to be reviewed per this section. What that part is alluding to is that they can make other changes to maintain the building without having to come into compliance with this section. But windows would still be looking at, and they would still need to comply with the transparency standards. Does that answer it?
I guess. I guess then in terms of glazing, this particular area, what I'm concerned about is the privacy of patients. And the fact that we already have purposely as a society here distinguish us 2 different types of pharmacies, one for medical or recreational cannabis use and everything else. And many doctors' offices also have their own frosted glass doors and windows. And so having to have a certain type of business not be able to have the benefit, be able to protect the privacy of its patients does concern me. I'm not sure how all of the language that your team has put together, while I appreciate it, it's very confusing. And I don't know how one would look at the wording that's in here and have a clear understanding of what they can or cannot do.
Along those lines, can you discuss the state requirements for that have led to the frosted glass, and how those would interact with what measures would be available to a business to meet the state requirements of screening, and would those address Heather's questions about patient privacy? Does that make sense?
I'm comfortable jumping in on this unless Cassie, you wanted to start.
I think you got it. You've done more investigation.
Yeah, absolutely. So the state, so in the House Bill 701, there is explicit language requiring cultivators and manufacturers to obscure their processes from the public, and that is only growing and manufacturing. At no point in the House bill or in previous legislation is there a state requirement for a dispensary to frost, fog, obscure their glass, or maintain a sense of privacy. That's not in our local regulations either. And essentially, through design excellence, most of these or all of these dispensaries essentially should have been compliant with the local regulations to include more transparency in their glass than they currently have. But coming back to Jordan's question, there's not a conflict whatsoever. There are no state requirements essentially that would be or would lead to a sense of conflict there.
Yeah, and that's kind of what our conversations with the state told us, but we have heard from local dispensaries that inspectors had made them do that. So we're still trying to kind of investigate where that was coming from, since we can't find it in the language, and the contact we reached out to said it wasn't required. So we don't know if there was a disconnect at some point with inspectors or what really happened there.
And there are cannabis stakeholders that we've reached out to that also said that their choice to obscure their glass was a personal aesthetic choice and a personal choice to protect the privacy of their patients.
Heather?
That's it for today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Sandra, I'm not sure if you put your hand down and jump back in, or if you.
No, I got kicked off of the meeting, so I appreciate keeping my place in line. Thank you.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So I have a couple, now I have 3 amendments that I would like to make. Heather reminded me of another one. Is now the proper time to do that, or should I wait until the end of the discussion, or should I wait till Monday?
What I'm hoping is to, I don't know that we'll have time to do amendments today. So what I'm hoping to do is get the intention of the amendments out on the floor. So if you could state what they are, but just not make the motions right now, that would be really helpful.
Okay, would you like me to make my reasoning behind them as well,
Sure.
or just okay.
Yeah,
So
I
agree with Heather entirely. I would like to omit the regulation for the frosted windows. I do and not only is it interfering with patient privacy, so I would like to omit that limit. Also, can you guys hear me? It just said that my internet connection is unstable. Keep going.
It's going in and out, but
better now. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me now? Shoot.
No, you're good.
I will come back when my internet is better.
You're okay now.
Oh, now? Okay.
Sandra, if you want to turn off your camera, sometimes connection works a little bit better if you're not using maximum capacity of your internet.
Okay, is that better? Okay, great, thank you. So did you guys hear my omitting the regulation to limit frosted windows? Okay, so my next one is to omit altogether the simple law of supply and demand. I believe it is poor business practice to put up a shop of any business, close their business of the same type. So we can let supply and demand help with any concerns of the crowding problem. I also believe it's not up to the government to decide how many legal businesses can be in a certain area. I also would like to allow home occupation. It's very expensive to lease or buy a space to have your commercial business, regardless of what it is. So I would like to propose an amendment to allow home occupation, to allow small business ownership. It also has been said that we want residents to be within walking distance to stores to reduce carbon emissions. So since this will be a legal business, we should not require such businesses to be areas so that they're within walking distances. But great.
Yeah, I think we lost you there for a little while, but I got the three of the frosted windows.
Would it be okay if I emailed them?
Absolutely, yeah.
It was mail them. It was frosted windows, the buffer, and home occupation.
Yep, I got all those. So that's great. Thanks. I've had luck with joining with using phone audio as well. So you're welcome to give that a try if it's helpful. But it's in the audio settings. Okay. Next up, Gwen, and then Heidi.
Thanks. I'll try and be quick. I appreciate the time spent on giving some analysis to the 600-foot buffer, and I've been chewing on this for the last few days and trying to figure out what my thoughts are on it. And first of all, although several months ago I was hearing that there was an appetite for people in Missoula that they wanted to really limit these shops in the downtown business area so that there was not a big impact. I'm hearing that mostly from business owners in the downtown that they're fine with the 500-foot buffer now. And so the dynamic has changed there. I'm not hearing as much that there's an appetite for increasing it. And I appreciate looking at the 500 to 600 difference. Just a couple clarifying questions when you were talking about I believe what I wrote down was if there's a 500-foot buffer, exempting out those that are grandfathered in, which is kind of a separate analysis. But if we were starting clean with a 500-foot buffer, we would have 7 shops downtown. With a 600-foot buffer, we would have 5 shops downtown. When you talk about downtown, does that include the hip strip or not?
It does not. We are only looking at the central business district. I will note that even with the 500-foot buffer, the hip strip has shown to already be at capacity, so no new ones would be permitted.
Okay, follow up, Jordan.
Go ahead.
Thanks. So I have been thinking a lot about this. My goal is I am fine having these retail shops all over Missoula in terms of the commercial areas. My fear is to just not have a huge impact that saturates the downtown and the hip strip for various reasons. But also I feel like speaking about economics, it's just too hard to extrapolate out into the future what's going to happen. And as this industry works itself out. So I think at this point, I am fine just leaving it at 500 and not trying to expand it to 600, because I think we need a year or two to see what happens. And then if we need to address it further, we can do that as a proactive council. But also a different way I looked at it was, I'm not sure exactly what the boundary is of downtown, but I'm sure it's, 5 blocks by 6 blocks. It's easily 25 to 30 square blocks. And if there's a total of 7 that's allowed with a 500-foot buffer, I think that's fine. I understand that we have grandfathered in and there could be more added, and then there's probably going to be a sifting process. So I just wanted to put that out there and say, thank you, staff. This has been a quick and very comprehensive education on a complicated topic in the last few weeks. But that's where my thought process is at now, because I feel like I've made a lot of noise about it. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
Thank you, Gwen. Heidi, and then Mirta.
So I have a quick question about non-conforming businesses. Are say cookies, if they're non-conforming, would they be allowed to sell to a new owner as long as the business licensing itself stays consistent?
Yeah, so the non-conforming, it's per the use. which means that it could change to another dispensary. The use would stay the same, and the new owner would be allowed to license and operate there. What couldn't happen is if a different type of use moved in and then it wanted to go back to a dispensary, at that point, we wouldn't allow it.
This is Ben Brewer.
Thank you. And I just wanted to, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This is Ben Brewer with CPDI, and just wanted to clarify the use is tied to the location, so it's specific to that location.
Right. So as long as it just stayed in that location, it could turn over. Got it. And then I just had a quick comment on the glazing. I think I because of our like design excellence corridors, and I think we'll probably see a lot of these in corridors. I don't think that, I think the burden of being more creative about providing privacy to customers is fairly similar across business uses, with how to create an inviting street space. So I think, I support moving forward with what's in the ordinance now, and think it, still offers the opportunity for privacy while also trying to maintain an inviting space to people that aren't necessarily using that location.
Thanks, Heidi. Mirta, and then Amber.
Thank you. I guess a couple of questions that I have. Can we legally be more restrictive than the state in terms of buffer? You might have covered this at the very beginning, but I just want to make sure that I'm even thinking about different buffers. There's no point if we're going to encounter some legal challenges by having, say, a 750-foot buffer rather than 500, because 500 is what the state has right now. And along the same lines, what happens to the way the city, define as a buffer versus a linear type of buffer that the state uses to measure? How are we legally allowed to do that? Is that within our bounds, or are we going to encounter some legal challenges from businesses too, if we were to put some greater buffer than what the state recommends? And then I have another question.
I will share my screen here. So this is the section of the buffer here. And sorry, I don't have it committed to memory, but I believe that there is a provision here that does allow for local.
Yeah, it's right at the top there.
Right here.
Yeah, right next to where it's strike through.
So it does allow for localities to offer a greater distance. This is specifically in relation to churches, synagogues, and places of worship and schools. I'm not, I guess, could you clarify your question? Is this in regards to places of worship and schools, or is this in regards to our proposed dispensary buffer?
The proposed dispensary.
Okay. Well, then that's not pertinent. There's nothing expressly prohibiting localities from implementing a buffer between uses.
So the state is silent on it. We have that's within our purview to do.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That's important. And what about the way we measure a buffer versus how the state measures the buffer for schools and churches?
I believe that would just be a difference in the methodologies used to implement a land use control. So in this case, they've identified a methodology to measure from entrance to entrance, while staff has proposed a radius buffer because our mapping systems can more easily and accurately measure with that methodology.
Sure, I understand that, but I am wondering about the legality of it.
Again, the legislation is silent on
Okay.
that.
And Spencer, there's, part of the state bill that does give localities the power to implement additional regulations around cannabis generally, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's more what we would be relying on.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that if we're contemplating something that we're not getting too excited about it and then we can't really do anything about it. My next question, and I think I brought this up at another meeting, but if I haven't, I just want to make sure that I put it in your radar that under section 2040, the use and building specific standards section, could we add a note to energy consumption there, linking it to Title V, so that anyone who uses Title 20 will be able to see that there is an enforcement mechanism via the Title V licensing regulations. And maybe that doesn't have to happen now because you need to ensure that you have the mechanism set up for that under Title V. But at such point when we're good to go in terms of regulation of energy, I would really like to see that connection, that link between Title 20 and Title V, so that it's very clear from the beginning to anyone that it will be regulated, but not through zoning. Have that as a use that is regulated in our Title 20. Is that possible? And if so, then I would make that an amendment if you don't have it there already.
Yes, it's possible. We can add a note or a commentary linking the two, and we can do that perhaps concurrent to our Title V.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Marta. Amber.
Yeah, thanks. So I agree with Heidi first about the frosting, and that I think businesses can get creative and are creative. There are lots of businesses that aren't frosted that you can't see all the way to the back of the business. So I think there are ways to get around that, and around the privacy issue. And I think we have our design excellence standards in place, and I think that they're good. So, so I wouldn't support taking that out. I'm curious, I'm still, Jordan, and I don't know if this is the time, I still have issue with the downtown area and maybe making the buffer bigger there. And this is not around marijuana specifically, because I would feel the same way if we had liquor stores every other block downtown. And I'm just curious what the rules around, I don't know what the rules around liquor stores are, but I know there are a lot of places in this country that I've been that have a lot of liquor stores, and they're not necessarily what you want in your downtown. And I think of them in the two things in the same way. So does anyone know what the rules around liquor stores are?
I can try to start on that. This is Ben Brewer with CPDI, and I mean, for one thing, there are state requirements about distances from things like schools and whatnot. I don't know what they are exactly, but I would say, with liquor stores, there's the limiting factor of liquor licenses, and so there's only so many of those that are available. So that's a big qualifying factor. And I think, just I would throw out with regard to this use specifically to cannabis, one of the things that we've gotten feedback on in talking to the industry is that just because this is allowed in certain places doesn't mean that there are willing landlords out there that are there. And so there are other factors, market factors and whatnot that are that we would anticipate also, that are going to play a role in how many of these open up where. And so I would just keep that in mind thinking about the buffer as well.
Thanks. And Ben, I appreciate you said, someone said that on Monday, and I appreciate, or maybe last week, whenever it was, but I appreciate you saying that, because I do think that that's something that I'm not trying to restrict it so much that we can't saturate the market. So that is something that I will keep in mind for sure, because if you have unwilling landlords on top of too much of a buffer, I can see where that would be a problem. I had one other question and now it is out of my mind. So I will ask it on Monday if needed.
Okay, thanks, Amber. Sandra.
Thanks. I moved to a different spot in my house, so hopefully my internet is better. Oh, I just got a notification that it's unstable. So will I be able to make these amendments on Monday or, okay, I'll just do that then.
So that's what I'm leaning toward, is that, and our rules actually technically, council rules state that there's a public hearing draft that's published, and it's cleanest and easiest if we make within our rules if we make amendments on Monday. And so I misspoke this last Monday in indicating that we'd have amendments today, but I just think it's really helpful, to state your intention to make a motion so that staff and the public and other members of council are aware. So thank you for listing those out earlier.
Okay, thank you. And not this Monday, but Monday after.
That's correct, the 29th.
All right, yep. All right, thanks.
Okay. So that's the end of my speaker queue. I've got a few comments that I'll get out into the record. I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this at staff level. I think it's really important to zoom out for a minute and talk about why we're doing this. If we don't do this, then we have a patchwork of regulations. If we don't take any action, we have a patchwork of regulations and some inconsistencies that go into place on January 1st. We have state mandated buffers on schools and places of worship, but we don't have the tools that are provided by the buffer in the local ordinance. We have some real ambiguity in our code related to manufacturing, and so we would have staff having to make judgment calls based on where manufacturing uses fit into the code, and it wouldn't lead to the predictability that we like to see in our zoning code. I also want to. So I think it's really important that we take action within the timeline proposed, and that we move forward with these relatively light touch regulations. These regulations recognize the will of the voters, was to permit these types of uses, and the role of local government as indicated in House Bill 701, and as we see across every type of use in our community. The role of local government is to make sure that those uses fit into our zoning code in a way that's appropriate and that's beneficial to our community. And I think that these regulations do that. I think that there's a lot of light touch regulations that will ensure that these uses are a success, that they don't create a nuisance, that they don't create health and safety issues, all of the things that a zoning code is supposed to do. That's what we're doing here. I will weigh in, I guess, a little bit on my opinions on the buffers. I've thought a lot about the buffers as proposed, and I really appreciate the new graphics that we had today to demonstrate those the impact of those buffers. I personally believe the 500-foot buffer meets the intent of providing for a diversity of uses, and is not overly restrictive. And an increase from a 500-foot buffer to a 600-foot buffer is that was a good thought exercise, and it was really useful to look at those circles on the map, and visually seeing those circles increase in size made me realize that going from a 500-foot buffer to a 600-foot buffer, it's a linear or it's a 20% increase in the diameter of the circle, but it's a 44% increase in the area, and so I think that it just goes to show that just a minor tweak to that buffer would result in and then that was exacerbated by the 1,000-foot buffer, which I think is untenable. So I feel like we've struck a good balance there, and I like that proposed buffer. I also am supportive after quite a bit of consideration, after talking to Heather about the glazing. I'm supportive of our goals to create vibrant, active street fronts and active urban places. And our design excellence goals provide for transparent glazing and active street level uses as well. And I believe there's other tools, screening internal to the building, or other alternative compliance methods in the design excellence code that makes me comfortable with continuing to have the glazing provisions. I recognize that privacy is a concern, and I think that there's tools available to the businesses to protect the privacy of their clients while still maintaining an active street front usage. So, and most importantly, I want to thank our staff for putting together this work over in very short order to react to the state legislature and to meet our deadlines in order to have this code implemented 2 days before the new year, when these uses can start coming into play. So that's it for me. Any other additional comments from the committee? Amber.
Thanks, Jordan. And I want to share what you said for staff. I really appreciate the work on this. And as I said before, I think it's a great, thorough presentation. One thing I said on Monday, and that I will say again, is I absolutely feel that the voters wanted this. I voted for it. I actually did a speech in college that we should have legalized it back then, which was a long time ago. So I believe in this. I also believe that that the voters expected us to thoughtfully regulate this. And so I don't think that we are, if we look at this carefully, whether we go with what's proposed or not, I do not feel like in any way that is against what the voters voted for. So I want to be clear on that as we go through this conversation.
Sandra.
I have to respectfully disagree with my colleague there. I believe that the voters voted for this and they did not think that there would be so much regulation with this. So I think that we should try to limit as much regulation as possible. I do see your point, Ms. Cheryl, but I do have to disagree because we cannot put words in the voters' mouths for this because they voted yes or no. And they voted yes, so we cannot regulate it into submission here. I do want to thank the staff and everyone for this because I know that you guys are putting so much work into it. I can't even imagine how much work you're putting into it. So thank you so much about that. And I guess that's it. I'll save all the rest of my comments for Monday. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone have any other proposed amendments that they'd like to get out into the record today? Any amendments that they intend to make so that our staff can prepare and so that our colleagues can prepare? Okay, seeing none, of course, that opportunity, of course, exists until the main motion is passed, and so or not. But if those do come up between now and the public the close of the public hearing, feel free to email those to staff as well. Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Mr. Larson.
Yeah, Matt Larson, Ward 3. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I agree with Ms. Vaseka about the kind of overregulation of this market. It's already an incredibly difficult market, both for housing and to find any sort of opportunity with this new revenue stream for the city. With the recreational, 3% tax of all the products that are going to be sold. I don't understand how we, as the city and our appointed leaders, point to state law when it's, tying our hands metaphorically to prevent us from creating affordable housing, and then, go and try and overregulate this new industry. And I think the timing of it is totally ridiculous too, because we aren't even giving the market an opportunity to see what people want. Weed tourism will be huge. This opens up a market like you probably haven't seen before. And the city is going to reap a 3% tax on all this stuff. So I just don't understand what's gained from over-regulating this in my eyes, and I think we should just stick to the state the state bill as it is and just see what happens before we start to theorize and extrapolate. I appreciate the staff's work on this, but I just think that we could spend our time and money better elsewhere than addressing this non-issue.
Thanks for your comments. There are no other public comments in the audience. And so I want to thank everyone again for going half hour over. And is there do the staff have any closing comments before we adjourn? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, everyone. And we will be adjourned.